The borders of every nation are the battlefields of history, industrial and political. There, where sheep graze, are man's fields of battle against nature, against men. And such battlefields breed pioneers. Men of the border understand nature, the ways of birds and beasts. They handle and rear sheep. But British yeomen can adapt themselves to other lands. When new lands were opened up, they were quick to see and grasp their opportunity and go overseas. And gradually there flowed back to the mother country ever-increasing supplies of meat and wool. For they had taken with them not only their knowledge, but also the pick of Britain's flocks. Many they took to Australia, New Zealand and other parts of the empire, some to the United States, a few to South America, all in time to yield their rich return of wool. They had taken with them the traditions of the wool markets that stood in little towns unchanged in generations. They had taken sheep from Romsey and Lincoln and planted the names of these breeds thousands of miles away by lonelier mountains and more turbulent waters. They had taken them too from the moors of Yorkshire that border the industrial valleys now prosperous on wool. The men themselves came from north and south, where today can still be seen the types whose kinsmen have peopled an empire. From these hills, where generations have looked down in peace and war, came the sires of sheep now famous throughout the world. The woolen industry depends not only upon home produce. From Chile to the Great Lakes that border the United States and Canada, from Cape Town to Wellington, each sends of its best. The pioneers left behind their brothers and sisters, versed in weaving and the arts of wool. We can only follow one use and one method, choosing that to illustrate a great industry. All processes start with the sorting of the wool. There may be 6 qualities in one fleece, varying from the finest at the neck to the coarsest at the tail. As enough of one quality is ready, it's chopped into pieces of nearly equal size. As the pieces settle, they're gathered up to be fed into the scouring machine. Here, hot water and soap assist the combs to remove every scrap of dirt. In the wool trade, design is a matter of color and pattern. When an order is received, the designer takes from the range of yarns samples of those used when the pattern was first made. The variety of colors seems endless, but new ones are added every year. Despite that, this girl's color sense enables her to pick the right yarns in a matter of seconds. Let's follow the cloth with violet and red in it. Once checked by the dyer with the specimens he has previously treated, they cease to be color patterns and are to him chemical formulae. Today, science enables the dyer to secure a steady and fixed color and has given him greater scope. But modern science is the first to acknowledge its indebtedness to our forefathers for their resource and ingenuity in using everything within their grasp. The origin of dyes is like a witch's charm. Crushed body of a cochineal, purple from a shellfish, saffron from crocus, red from madder roots, logwood and cutch, lichen and bark, dock root and bilberry. Measure them carefully while the pots begin to boil. The wool is dyed by dipping in the hank or by plunging it into huge baths of boiling dye. As one bath is ready for the red dye, the wool in another begins to wear the color it will always hold. At first it's wet and we can't distinguish the shade. But when it's dry and ready for blending, we see it's violet. The color of the yarn must be even from beginning to end. Layers of white and violet, then of blue, are spread on the blending floor. Bit by bit, it's fed into a mixer. A special oil is added, and soon the wool is ready for carding. The oiled wool is passed between rollers, covered with small, sharp wire teeth. Eventually, every individual fiber has been pulled out and rearranged. During carding, constant checks are made to ensure that the chosen color is maintained. As the violet is passing through, so in the background is red. The cross movement is peculiar to border woven cloth, adding strength and wearing properties to the yarn. The wool is forced gradually by grooves in the wire teeth into thin ribbons, which when twisted or spun will form the yarn. Are laid on the drums of the spinning mule, the spindles of which are on a movable carriage. When the mule is set in motion, these spindles revolve, giving the twist. The carriage moves away, not only keeping the yarn taut, but reducing it to its correct weight by stretch. The red completely spun, the mules are stripped ready for the second twist. The yarn from 2 bobbins is twisted onto 1. As the operator finishes loading in the red, he moves over and starts his machine. Here is our third color, steel gray, and we see the 2 threads as they become one, united onto another bobbin. The wool is run off the bobbin over a grooved wheel onto a small spool for placing into the bank. The bank is loaded with all 4 colors of the warp according to the pattern of the cloth, and with the addition of black, the colors are complete. From the bank, the threads are drawn off, and each individual thread is kept in its proper place. Eventually, it's tied off onto the cylinder of the mill. With one last careful look, the warper starts the great cylinder spinning round. Each time the required length of warp has been completed, a bell rings, and the process is repeated until the whole width is covered. On completion, the warp is carefully rolled off onto the weaving beam and wheeled away for the next stage. With all pieces, every individual thread of the warp has to be drawn through a little eyelet. The girl weavers snatch a quick cup of tea while the drawing is nearing completion. It needs a good eye and close attention. They must be careful here because mistakes cannot be corrected later. The method and gear have been the same for generations. As the drawing finishes, the weaver receives the first lot of her bobbins and prepares her shuttles while the foreman loads the machine. The basic principles of weaving have never changed. The machinery has only been speeded up, and a modern loom can trace its ancestry right back to the Middle Ages. Weaving is one of the most ancient and widespread of all crafts. So, gradually, our 4 colors assume the pattern of our cloth, and one more piece of border weave nears completion. soon as it's woven, every piece is examined and knots and other blemishes removed. It will go through several other stages, but to the eye it will not change much after leaving the loom. And while our piece is being finished, so other pieces in endless variety of color and type undergo their final examinations. Every small fault is marked and the cloth passed to experienced hands for correction. The weaver brings her piece to be examined by the foreman, for the girls are paid for quality as well as quantity. With measuring, our cloth is finished and ready for dispatch. And even the cloth we've seen woven is but one side of the wool trade. In Princes Street, Edinburgh, in the heart of Britain's loveliest city, we shall always see kilts and tartans of the Scottish clans. The lorry goes on its way to the docks. The trade routes testify that the woolen industry remains an ambassador of commerce. It has brought wool from the two hemispheres to be sent out again in finished goods, whose quality is as fine as tradition and craftsmanship can make them.